Hey everyone, what's going on? On July 30th, we got this story in sports of a major brawl that happened at the Cincinnati Reds and Pittsburgh Pirates game. And this was on the same day that Yasiel Puig, or however you pronounce his name, got traded to the Cleveland Indians for their pitcher Trevor Bauer. And right away, what stuck out to me is that the two teams that are playing are the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And if you go back to what I was talking about in 2016 when I predicted the Indians to play the Cubs in the World Series from July on, I was pointing out how there was a Native American theme that kept coming up within the mainstream media. And we already knew the Cubs were most likely going to be in the World Series due to the number 108 and a bunch of things. But I kept seeing all of these stories about the Native American theme and how it was connected to the area that I live in. And then what? Just before the World Series, we got all of these stories about the Dakota Access Pipeline, right? Reminding us of the Native Americans. Then the Indians are in the World Series. Oh, the odds. But a major thing that I was talking about in 2016, in September, we got a story about a train wreck that happened in Hoboken, New Jersey, right? Hoboken, New Jersey. And this is interesting because it's the place where the first ever Major League Baseball game was supposedly played. And they told us that 114 people were injured on that train wreck. And the same day that this happened, the Cubs tied the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? The Cubs tied the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates were connected to the Cleveland Indians as well, because in this practice of coding numbers into words and phrases, let me type it out here. And if you're new to the channel, check out some links. Every single day, our sports are scripted this way, our mainstream media is scripted this way, and so on. But Pittsburgh Pirates equal 228. And earlier in the year, in July, the Chicago Cubs had picked up Aroldis Chapman. And Aroldis Chapman was born on 2/28 of 1988, which was the same year and the same exact day that this guy named Harvey Keene died. Harvey Keene. He died on Aroldis Chapman's birthday. The exact same day that Aroldis Chapman was born, this guy died. And he died age 57. The word World Series equals 57. And this guy is the reason that the Indians were cursed by the Rocky Colavito, because he got traded to the Indians for Rocky Colavito. So I knew there was something important. And then the Cubs, the same day we get this story about the Hoboken train wreck with 114 people injured, the Cubs tie the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the word tie in Sumerian and Jewish gematria, the word tie equals 114. Keep in mind, this stems back to Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism and so on. But 114 people injured, the word tie equals 114. The last time that there was a tie was in the year 2005, when the Houston Astros tied the Cincinnati Reds. And that tie just so happened to be 114 days before the World Series began that the Astros were in, and they got swept by the Chicago White Sox. So 114 days before the World Series, where the Chicago team won, there was another tie. So I knew there was something important. And I knew if I looked at the Cubs record, and if the Cubs went on to win the World Series, they won the World Series with 114 wins on the season. And it was also their 114th season being called the Chicago Cubs, right? So 114, this big important number with the Cubs. The Indians coach Terry Francona even lost in the World Series, right? And he now has an 11-4 record in coaching the World Series. His father, who played on the team with Rocky Colavito even, his birthday was 11-4, and a bunch of other things, I talked about how in 2005 on 8/8, which is important because curse of the Billy Goat, that the Cubs were cursed by equals 88. 8/8 though, on 8/8 of 2005, my uncle Barney had went to a Chicago Cubs game, and the game was against the Cincinnati Reds. He took his wife there for their 25th wedding anniversary. And After the Cubs won the World Series, my uncle, who was a big Cubs fan, he ended up dying on January 14th in a mysterious car crash. And my neighbor, who was also a huge Cubs fan, had the Cubs flag hanging out as long as I ever knew him. He also died, and the new person that moved in was a girl I went to high school with, and her birthday was 11/4, 114. So now I'm seeing this story with Yasiel Puig getting traded the same day there's this big brawl with his former team, the Reds, and they're fighting the Pittsburgh Pirates of all teams. And there was a similar brawl that happened on the date of 4/7 this year, which notice it was 114 days before. What are the odds of that? 114 days before that, there was another brawl between these two teams. And remember, tie equals 114 is this big thing connected to the Indians and the Cubs. And even if you read this story here, in this game, after the brawl happened, they went on and finished the game, and the Cincinnati Reds lost 11-4, right? 114. 11-4, 114 days after the last time there was a big brawl. You know, and it's these two teams that I'm telling you are synced up to the Indians and the Cubs coding. And I'm not so sure that's the teams that are going to be in the World Series this year, but this narrative is interrelated to some other things. Possibly the Indians. I still think that it's connected to the Astros being in the World Series this year. You know, think about Harvey Keene. And the year that the Astros won, it was just after Hurricane Harvey. Then Matt Harvey was the first pitcher to pitch in Houston against the Astros after Hurricane Harvey. It was 52 days before the World Series began. Harvey equals 52, flood equals 52, hurricane 52. 52 days before Matt Harvey pitches, Steve Harvey goes to the Mayweather fight that was in August, and so on, right? So I think there's something important to the Houston Astros with all this, especially Yasiel Puig's full name equals 92, just like Astros, just like Cincinnati Reds, his former team, right? Cincinnati Reds. Also, he played for the Dodgers, right? When they lost to the Astros in the World Series. So it would seem kind of fitting if he would go back to the World Series to me. But another interesting thing in regards to all of this is that his birthday just so happens to be 12/7. And in 2016, this big narrative I was talking about with the Cleveland Indians was all about the number 127. We got this story about the girl from, oh, what the heck was the movie? Allegiant or whatever, where, oh, it's a movie about Chicago. It's kind of like the Hunger Games and whatever. The girl got arrested, and there was 127 people that got arrested at the Keystone Pipeline, right? The Native American theme. And North Dakota equals 127. And Game 7 of the World Series was the 127th anniversary of North Dakota being a state. Think about that with, once again, the Native American theme, the Keystone Pipeline, and so on. There was also a bunch of stuff with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan had played baseball under Terry Francona when he coached the Birmingham Barons, and Michael Jordan, can't you remember, you know, oh, I'll just look it up here. He retired from baseball on a date numerology of 127. The Bulls retired his jersey 1 year, 27 days after he retired. He played 127 games for the Birmingham Barons. You know, the Major League Baseball strike happened 127 days after Jordan's first ever baseball game that was on, I believe, 4/8. And that's the number synced up to the Indians, who haven't won since the year 48, and Cleveland equals 48. And 8/8 that year. 8/8 was the 127th day of the Major League Baseball season. So, you know, just a bunch of 127 stuff. I talked about the area that I live in, the Omaha Indians, and my town had killed the last keeper of the sacred pole named Chief Yellow Smoke, and then the town was saved by the Freemasons. But the day that sacred pole came back to them was on a date numerology of 127, and the date was July 12th, which in most parts of the world they write it as 12/7. So there was a bunch of 127 stuff connected to the Indians, and now I'm seeing that Yasiel Puig's birthday is 12/7. So Perfect for him to go to the Indians. There was also a number of things connected to this finger symbolism, and Terry Francona doing the bird, and Trevor Bauer injuring his finger with the drone and whatnot. So I know that it's perfect that he got traded for Trevor Bauer and whatnot. Plus, Michael Jordan was really connected to the baseball strike, right? And the movie Angels in the Outfield came out just before the baseball strike. And that's why it's important that we got the death of Tyler Skaggs, too. So there's a big theme with that. The Angels. Also, look at how scripted this is. So Puig was traded for number 47, Trevor Bauer of the Indians. And if you go to his birthday, he was traded 4 months and 7 days before his birthday. And he was traded for number 47, Trevor Bauer. July 30th, the day he was traded, was also the 211th day of the year. 211 is the 47th prime number. And when the Pirates beat the Reds in that Brawl game, the Pirates got their 47th win of the season. What are the odds of that? Also, the last time there was a brawl between the Pirates and the Reds this year, that happened on April 7th, 4-7, right? So a brawl happens on 4-7, then another one happens on the 211th day, which is the 47th prime, the same day that Yasiel Puig gets traded for number 47, 4 months and 7 days before his birthday. You couldn't have scripted it any better. And they tell you that in every game you ever watch. I swear that one of the announcers always says, couldn't have scripted it any better, It's just such a joke. The game that played on 4-7, the Reds lost 5-7. Remember, World Series equals 57. When the Brawl started, the score was 11-3, which makes me think of the 113th World Series in the Houston Astros. And it is interesting that Curse of Rocky Colavito also equals 113. Something that I was pointing out big time last season, because there was a bunch of stuff connected to Rocky Colavito and how it synced up. There was this satanic cipher that I discovered after the Cubs, or we discovered, I guess, after the Cubs had won the World Series in 2016 over the Indians. And just look at this satanic cipher here. Aroldis Chapman equals 624. And so does Rocky Colavito. Rocky Colavito. And he got traded to the Detroit Tigers. Detroit Tigers equals 624. And last year, the Indians even played the Tigers on the date of 624. So I thought there was something significant to the Indians maybe last year. But it wasn't for the Indians. It was synced up to that number 114 again, though, because World War equals 114, so does Holocaust, so does Pearl Harbor, so does Kim Jong-un, and a bunch of other things that are connected, Possibly. Kim Jong-un hasn't been a World War III yet, but World War 114. But the guy who broke the curse of the Bambino for the Boston Red Sox was Terry Francona, who's the coach of the Cleveland Indians. And the Red Sox also won the World Series just before World War I against the Chicago Cubs on 9/11 and a bunch of other things. It was all about the number 114. And then the Red Sox won the 114th World Series and so on. So it was just something related to the Indians, but it wasn't for the Indians. Another reason I thought all of that too was because World War I, the first person to ever die in World War I was Merle Hay, who was a guy from Iowa. And there's the same day as the Cubs won the 112th World Series. The game started on 11/2. And it was 1 month and 12 days after Back to the Future Day and a bunch of stuff. But that same day, we got a shooting in Des Moines, Iowa by the Merle Hay Mall. And I used to live really close to there. And I worked at Burger King that equals 112. And right across the street was the 1908 Drought Bar. Right? 1908 Drought Bar. And the Cubs hadn't won a World Series since 1908. And they went on, right? It started raining. They went to extra innings. It started raining, and then the Cubs went on to win the World Series, ending the drought and so on, right? So I knew there was something important to World War 114, Chicago Cubs. and whatever else. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how these mainstream sports stories and other mainstream media stories start playing out. Definitely interested to see what happens on Rocky Colavito's birthday of August 10th. So maybe we'll get a few more clues, but I feel like it's all for the Houston Astros. There's a bunch of stuff that's just synced up to the Astros. The Angel stuff was all about Tyler Skaggs' birthday on 713, which is the Houston area code. So we'll leave it there. Have a good one. Peace.